Hey, Clayton. In Deuteronomy 22, there are all these rules about not mixing different types of things like fabrics or seeds or animals. Why would mixing things be a problem? This is a really head scratcher of a law. When you read these and they're saying you can't weave linen and wool together, you can't plant two kinds of seed in the same field, you can't breed two different types of animals together. You couldn't breed a donkey and a horse, and what do you get, a mule or something like that. You can't do those sorts of things here. And we say, what's the big deal about those things? I actually asked a biblical scholar about this, Dr. Ben Noonan. I did an interview about weird Old Testament laws, so he addresses that somewhat in his answers there. You might want to go check that out. He also gives some other good principles for understanding laws that might leave you scratching your head. But let's talk about some of the ways people understand this. The truth is we don't know the exact answer to why these things are off the table, but let me give you some of the theories that people have put out there. One theory is that this is a way of avoiding pagan practices going on in the land. That's something about mixing these things was a part of either the kind of magic of the Canaanite world. This is how they thought they would, evoke certain spiritual powers. This is something they were doing to, interact with fertility gods or something like that. That maybe somewhere, we don't have like documentation of this, but it feels like the sort of thing that maybe has to do with an ancient pagan practice. And so they're saying, don't do this. Maybe don't, mix animals the way they would, or, plant seeds in ways that they think are going to evoke something. Don't do those sorts of things. So it's not really about the act itself. It's about the way it works in their culture and the religious system and the spiritual system of the day. Second theory is that this is respecting creational boundaries. The idea is God has made the world with certain boundaries between different things. So you read the Genesis 1, days of creation. It says there's light and there's dark, there's sea and there's sky, there's land and there's ocean, there's this kind of tree and that kind of animal and all of these sorts of things that are kept in their own domains with an order and a structure to the world, and we ought to live within that structure. And so a lot of the things in Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy where it talks about things are off limits, sometimes it seems like it's ruling out things that cross the boundaries that God has placed in the world. That there are things that are forbidden simply because they are the sort of things that blend and cross those boundaries. They're unclean because of that. And so because the world has an order and a logic, God says, Israel, you're going to be a people that lives like that. You're going to exemplify, you're going to intensify the fact that this is a well-ordered world in well-ordered relationships related to God in a way that makes sense. And your life is going to express that in all sorts of different ways. And this is one of those ways. It may not seem like a big deal, but it's one of the ways that you're going to sort of represent the fact that I have put things and made things in a right order, and there's a goodness to that. It's a way of saying we go with the grain of reality. Even one of the examples in Deuteronomy 22 is something you might even understand. It's do not yoke an ox with a donkey. Like if you're plowing your field and you've got a yoke where you can put two animals to pull the plow, don't put a really big ox over here and a smaller donkey over here, because the ox is going to push forward and the donkey is going to be dragged behind. In a well-ordered world, the ox doesn't get to dominate the donkey. The donkey gets to move at the donkey's pace, and the ox get to move at the ox's pace. You don't try and drag one into the other. You let the things that were made be what they were made to be. And so some people say, maybe that's what these laws are about. Other people say this is actually about respecting the boundaries between the common and the holy. Now, what I mean by that is there are some things that are kind of ordinary life stuff that are just ordinary common things, but there are some things that God says, I'm going to specially designate to be used in a holy place, in the tabernacle, the worship center. In this place, there are certain offerings that are going to be offered here and only here. There are certain oils and incenses that are used here and only here. There are certain clothing that only the priests wear here. There are certain objects that only get used here. And there is a sacredness to keeping those things in their place. And the reason people say that this might have to do with that is because they've noticed that it is not 100% forbidden to mix clothing, to not wear clothing with mixed fabric. There is one group of people that is allowed to mix clothing of mixed fabric types, and that's the priests. The priests are allowed to have both of those fabrics, and the high priest has those things even more so. And so it almost seems like the more holy you get, the more close to God you get in the system, the more you're allowed to have things that are mixed together. There are even people who say, when you look at the visions of God in heaven and you look at the animals that are portrayed there, the living creatures that are there, they are mixes of animals. They've got wings and they have faces and they've got hooves and horns, and they're a mixture of things. They're eagles and oxen and all of these things. And so they look at that and they say mixed animals, mixed fabrics, mixed things seem to be things that are only in holy places. And so maybe the laws are saying, don't take the things that are meant to be only for this place and bring them out into common life and use them as if they're ordinary things. It's almost like this. It's saying only the police get to wear a police uniform. And so even though technically speaking, there's nothing morally wrong with wearing a blue shirt with a star on it, that's not going to be like a sin. But because it's designated only for the police, you don't get to wear that if you're not a cop on duty. And so it's that kind of thing. Don't dress like the priest because you're not a priest. Don't engage in things that can only be in the temple because you can't go in that part of the temple. And so maybe this is a law that respects the boundaries of holiness. Other people have said maybe this emphasizes the distinctiveness of Israel. Maybe there's no real logic behind these laws. They're just ways of making Israel weird so that they had to be separate from the people around them. People around them do all these things, but we do things differently. And it was a way of regularly reminding them, saying, hey, we are a distinct people. We are not like that. And making you consciously say, I have to be deliberate to obey God and not be like that. It makes you attentive. And so some of the laws seem to just be ways of saying Israel's going to be different, and it's a little bit arbitrary, but it's a way of saying this is our uniform, that's their uniform. We're going to look like we're on this team rather than that team. Now, here's the thing. We don't ultimately know. I don't know which of those explanations I like best. I think all of them have some different explanatory power, but it doesn't seem like any of them is obvious because the Bible doesn't say. And so we're left with a little bit of mystery there. Thanks for listening. If you've got your own questions, email questions@BibleSavvy.com. Like and subscribe to catch our regular episodes every Monday on the Bible Savvy Podcast.